Caribbean island hopping on a budget. Is it still just a flight of fancy?
The only way they can actually get from one place to another is by air, and it has to be affordable.
As the region's first budget airline hits the ground, we ask if low-cost travel will ever take off there. Also coming up this weekend, we hop on and off and on again for absolutely nothing, exploring Melbourne using its free network of trams.
And later on the Fast Track Travel Clinic, changing planes, a pain or a pleasure? And who's to blame if a hotel booking vanishes into cyberspace?
Hello, I'm Fiona Foster. Welcome to Fast Track. Now, cheap air travel is something that's taken for granted by many of us as budget airlines flourish across much of the globe. Yet there's still no successful operator in the Caribbean. Higher taxes, amongst other things, mean that in some cases it's cheaper to fly to the islands than between them. Redjet tried to change all that when it became the first low-cost carrier to enter the market there, but that too soon ran into trouble. So will the dream of cheap flights ever be realised there? Nick Davis reports from Barbados.
There's something about Barbados and the British West Indies that encourages travel by air, for even the fish do it.
And holidaymakers still flock to the beaches here. Barbados is about 1,500 miles from Miami and just over 100 from its closest neighbouring island, St. Vincent. But it's often cheaper to get here from the US than from within the Caribbean. Julian Nunez works in finance and is originally from Trinidad, just 200 miles from Barbados. It can cost her over $700 to visit family, and it puts other places out of reach.
Even though I've lived in the Caribbean, I've never really been to any of these other islands. I've never been to St. Martin, I've never been to Jamaica. Because again, prices were just as high as going to New York or Miami. So when you have those options, let me just take a trip to New York or Miami, as opposed to just hopping across to, these other little islands.
It should be an ideal place for island hopping, but because prices are so high, it never became a reality. At Barbados' Grantley Adams International Airport, the terminal is buzzing, but you'd hardly describe it as busy. And that's something they really want to change. There's a few people checking into Liat and Caribbean Airlines, but they want it to be full of people who are going to be travelling from here to other destinations in the Caribbean. The two biggest carriers are mainly state-owned. The majority shareholders of Liat are the governments of Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Caribbean Airlines is owned by Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. Now, they offer regular flights between the countries, but many complain that the prices are high. Within the Caribbean community, the average earnings per person is $6,000 a year, making air travel a luxury. So an Irish-owned airline, Redjet, took to the skies last May, revolutionising the region's aviation industry, bringing no-frills, low-cost flying for the first time to the Caribbean. A new era of affordable travel had arrived. Ian Burns, the founder, and his team saw a gap in the market.
People want to travel, they want to visit friends and relations. They need access. They live on islands, and the only way they can actually get from one place to another is by air, and it has to be affordable.
With fares starting as low as $4.99 plus taxes and charges, they undercut the competition. Keith Arno is a well-known figure in the local Guyanese community. It's grown in recent years as more workers from there moved to Barbados for employment. Many of them couldn't afford to make the trip home without other airlines.
Well, it gives people hope because people like to travel back home. Even if you're not going to stay there, live there for long, you like to visit there, and to be able to visit there frequently is a nice feeling. Gives you a connection.
The new carrier boosted local tourism on routes to the island. Visitors from within the Caribbean grew by nearly 10% in just a few months, but there were serious problems, and within a year they stopped flying. For Redjet, its planes remain grounded, its seats empty, whilst waiting to get back in the air. Many people now only have one or two options. That's for local carriers, Liat and of course Caribbean Airlines. Many of them say, however, that it's too expensive to make the short hop between islands, to visit friends and family and also to do business. You stopped flying. What went wrong? What made you decide that you were going to cancel services?
Well, we were in a position whereby we were being strangled and we weren't being granted routes. There is this resistance to allow competition in to compete against state-owned airlines. And state-owned airlines, the governments these days, they control the airline, they control the regulations, they control the regulators. And that's just, you know, an impossible cocktail to overcome. And so we got to the stage whereby we just couldn't continue operating on such a small route network.
Keep coming down, everybody take a seat.
So was there a conflict of interest for the governments in the region? Were they, as Redjet claim, afraid of competition?
When you look at all the airlines, they all have a fairly heavy subsidy in one form or the other. The governments are also shareholders. So the question is whether the government should be an equity holder in Redjet or not. So those are some of the challenges that we have to face.
The Redjet business model has been criticised, from the cheap prices through to the choice of fuel-thirsty jets, but it seems as if there was a combination of factors that led to its demise.
It was really the delays and thinking that they could get the airline up and running and operating without all the bureaucracy, without all the delays, and I think that cost them an enormous amount of money. They couldn't fill the seats even though there was a demand for them.
The low-cost option's gone and pricing remains an issue. The countries say they need to charge high airport taxes to pay for modern terminal facilities. The region is the most tourism dependent in the world, and island hopping could be a big market, but backpacking doesn't really happen because of the costs. For many passengers, they're waiting to see if the sun's set on this latest Caribbean airline. It opened up new possibilities for budget travel, but will anyone else be able to repeat it? Is low cost impossible here?
I think if they stick to a plan, I'm not so keen on the $20 fares, but $50, $100 would make a phenomenal difference. And then secondly, the governments have to look at the incredible taxes that they've imposed on interregional travel. It's critical to allow us to interact with our Caribbean neighbours. Every dollar we keep within this region means we become less dependent on the exterior countries that we trade with.
It's been reported that Redjet is looking at restarting in Jamaica, but the issues will remain the same. There's clearly a market for travel between the islands, but unless competition is encouraged, bringing cheap intra-regional travel to the Caribbean will be a long haul.
Nick Davis still dreaming of a day when he can get around those islands for anything less than a king's ransom. So what do you think? Have you been put off going to the Caribbean by those steep airfares? Do let us know at our address, fasttrack@bbc.com. And that's the address many of you use to get in touch following our recent programme about Georgia's efforts to get more tourists over the border from Russia.
These Russian tourists are holidaying in enemy territory, or at least that's the view from the Kremlin.
Well, lots of you had very nice things to say about Georgia, including David Butler from Dubai, who says,
I stayed right on the boundary of the old town and the new town, and right on the river opposite the presidential palace. It's a great fun city with the sun shining, as it was during my stay. Now here's a tip. Go to the Irish pub behind the Ambassadoria. You could be in Dublin until you walk out of the door.
Russian state media has claimed that Georgia has had safety problems, but that's not the experience of Rod Mackenzie from Tbilisi.
I have lived here for 17 years. and feel it's safer than other parts of Europe. I have 3 children and they are very safe. It has moved a long way in the past 15 years, though it still has a way to go.
And Jessica from Iowa agrees.
Everyone was so warm and friendly, and I never felt threatened or unsafe. Georgia has its troubled parts, such as Abkhazia, but for a holiday off the beaten path, I couldn't recommend this country enough.
It's good to hear so much positivity coming out about a country which has certainly been through some tough times. Do please keep those emails coming. Now let's have a look at what else has been making news in the world of travel this week.
New safety regulations governing cruises have been published following January's Costa Concordia disaster. From now on, the nationality of each passenger will be recorded to make sure public address announcements are tailored to those on board. That list of nationalities will then be passed on to emergency services if there's an accident. If you tend to travel with a laptop, be very careful at Atlanta, Miami and Chicago airports. They all headed a list of the very worst for computer theft, compiled by security software provider Absolute. A third were taken when the laptops were checked in as hold luggage, while 22% happened in the terminal or boarding area. And it seems you're not even safe once the plane door has closed. Absolute says 18% went missing on board flights. And the man behind the Dutch Divorce Hotel says he's in talks to take his concept global. We featured this place on Fast Track earlier this year. It offers unhappily married couples the chance to meet with lawyers and negotiate a settlement before taking a final meal together. Now Jim Halfon says he's talking to a chain in Holland about spreading the concept across the country. Ultimately, he wants to open in the US, the UK, Italy and Germany. No word of a loyalty scheme yet though.
Do stay with us, because coming up after the break, Simon's here to unpick your online booking problems and to answer that perennial question, when is the best time to book a flight? And we ride around Melbourne, Australia all day for absolutely nothing.
Hello and welcome to the Fast Track Travel Clinic with me, Simon Calder. And let's start with Marcin Rodzinka, who's flying from the Polish city of Rzeszów to Skopje in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, with a change of plane in Vienna.
I've got a 5-hour wait between flights. I'd like to leave the airport and explore the city a bit, but I'm not sure whether it's allowed.
Marcin, not only is it allowed, it's something I urge you to do, since you'll be adjacent to one of the finest capitals in Europe. The city airport train runs from the airport to the centre of Vienna in just 16 minutes, giving you plenty of time to explore this elegant and historic city. However, if you prefer to stay close to the departure gate, then consider this unique opportunity to get a backstage tour of Vienna Airport. The Visit Air Centre gives a great insight into how aviation works. It's German language only, but trust me, it's fairly clear what's going on, even if your German is as basic as mine. With airlines and governments wanting to know an increasing amount about the passengers booked to fly, David Davis from the Welsh city of Swansea is concerned about a mistake his daughter made when booking a budget flight online.
She inadvertently marked her status as married instead of single. To change this online will cost her around $200. Does she need to bother changing the status? Will she be denied boarding if she leaves it as it is?
David, tell her to save her cash. For flights within Europe, your daughter's marital status makes not the slightest difference to anyone. But if it makes your daughter feel more relaxed at check-in, she can always borrow a suitable ring to wear for the journey. Another online booking problem tripped up Rudy Kuhn from Bet Hamek in Israel when he reserved a hotel room, or so he thought.
My credit card's been charged, I received a voucher and a reservation number, but the hotel says it has no reservation. Who's to blame and where can I claim my money back?
Rudy, your booking was complicated because you went through a price comparison website, then booked through an agent in a different country, making this a tricky trail to follow. It appears your agent has the money, and if your attempts to contact them are unsuccessful, then put the payment into dispute with the credit card firm. My reading of consumer law in Israel indicates that, as in other countries, you can contact the issuer of the card, tell them what happened, backed up with documentation, and ask that they refund the charge. For future planning, I use price comparison websites for all manner of travel purchases, but whenever possible I book direct with the supplier, avoiding problems such as yours. Finally, Ruth Woods from the English county of Essex is planning a trip early next year to New York and Las Vegas.
When is the best time to book flights, and should I book connecting flights from home or buy them separately from my first stop in New York?
Ruth, academic theses have been written about that great imponderable: when to book your flight to get the lowest fare. With airlines adjusting prices from hour to hour, it's impossible to be certain, but the rule of thumb I use: if you plan to depart during a school vacation in your country of origin, then buy as early as you can, up to 11.5 months ahead. For other times, 2 months out is sufficient, and that's also when airlines often start cutting fares to fill their planes. And for an itinerary taking in more than one US city, always book it as a single transaction. It shouldn't cost any more, and it will smooth out problems if one or more of your flights is delayed. Whatever your travel quandary, email fasttrack@bbc.com and I'll try to find you an answer. From me, Simon Calder, bye for now and see you next time.
Now, Melbourne is Australia's second most populous city, and many visitors will associate it with the famous Melbourne Cup horse race. But another of its iconic features is its trams. It's one of the only places in the world where tourists can ride around the inner city for free. Carmen Roberts has been getting some local tips along the way.
So this is Melbourne, Australia's unofficial capital of culture and cool. And I've decided to ditch the guidebook and let the locals guide me.
The only catch is we're sightseeing along the tram route. Melbourne boasts the largest urban tramway network in the world, with 250 kilometres of track, 487 trams, 30 routes and close to 2,000 tram stops. We're on the City Circle line at the moment, a free service running around the Melbourne CBD.
Phil, how long have you been driving trams?
Well, I'm a bit of a rookie. I've only been driving for 8 years, so I'm a new kid on the block, still learning.
And what's your favourite part of the job?
I think the interaction with the passengers, especially on the city circle like this, but you still have to remain focused because little things can happen at the shortest notice. Taxis turn in front of you and you have to slam on the brakes, so you have to be focused at all times.
First stop, the famous laneways.
Fiona, tell me, where are we? It seems like we're in a hidden, secret little alleyway.
Well, this is Centre Place. This is right in the centre of town, but in fact still got that really lovely small business attitude about it.
So I hear Melbourne has a very big cafe culture.
There's a cafe culture, there's a bar culture, there's a bit of everything in Melbourne, but this certainly has an amazing opportunity of where our heritage is, Turkish, Italian, whatever it might be, but great flavours and independent stores.
Just across the Yarra River is the Eureka Skydeck, the highest public vantage point in the city, standing at 285 metres. The Edge is a 2 metre by 3 metre glass cube that moves off the side of the building.
So if you look up now, you can see the edge of the building there as we start to move out.
Oh my God.
Once we're 3 metres off the side of the building, the glass will instantly clear and you'll be able to see 285 metres down. Are you ready for it?
Oh my God. Don't look down, don't look down.
It scares me every time.
Okay, so Phil, what what's your one top tip that I won't find in any guidebook?
Well, you may find it in a guidebook, but it won't be a high-profile exposure. It's the 96 tram down to St Kilda. It travels on the old train line. We're allowed to do 60 kilometres an hour, which is a bit of a thrill in the tram. And it goes past the esplanade round the beachfront.
There's a Sunday vibe every day of the week on Ackland Street, one of the oldest streets in St Kilda. It's known for its cafes, clubs and continental cakes.
Hi Nicole, I've seen so many cake shops on Ackland Street. Why are there so many cake shops here?
Well, Carmel, it's a long story. I think that once upon a time it was mainly residential, and Monarch Cakes had opened by Polish immigrants because a lot of the Jewish population liked the sea and they moved towards St Kilda. And then one by one, all the other businesses started popping up from 1934 onwards. The Polish cheesecake is probably the most popular of all of our cakes. There's nothing in it that wouldn't have been used 100 years ago.
Take the 96 tram back to the city to finish up your tour, taking in yet another cafe, or simply wander the streets admiring the urban artwork. This is a city that's sophisticated and slick, yet edgy and rough, and possibly Australia's best example of a multicultural landscape. And what better way to see it than by tram?
Carmen Roberts having a cheap and cheerful weekend in Melbourne, Australia. And that's it for now. Next week, Rajan's in Barcelona, where one marina is making more space for the super rich, even at this worrying economic time for the Spanish. In the meantime, do please help yourself to our website, bbc.com/fasttrack, where you'll find lots more of our travel tips and stories. And while you're there, why not click through to bbc.com/travel. But until next week, from me, Fiona Foster, wherever your travels take you next, have fun, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.